So now this video discusses about how we can be able to solve the equations that contains radicals. So how should we be able to solve the equations associated with the radicals? By the way, if we say a radical simply means a root sign, we can have, let's say, the square root of 2. This is a surd, and the square root has a carrier given as 2, and we also have, let's say, the cube root of 5. So now the cube root of 5 has the carrier which is given as 3. Only that if it's about the square root, a carrier do not appear here. So make sure that before you go for this, you have gone through the first video we discussed about we discussed about the rational numbers, where you have more concept about the concept of the radicals, or should be the concept of the surds, because that's the basis of everything. We just have to apply here. So let's say we have a case. We have, let's say, square root of x, and let's say plus 2, which is equal to 7. So how should we have to solve for x in this case? Now, first thing we should have to consider, this is a typical example of the equation that contains the radical, and the x we are to solve for, it is under a square root. So first thing, we should have to express the expression with the square root as the subject formula. So in this case, we have the square root of x, which is equal to 7 minus 2. So in this case, we have the square root of x, which is equal to, we'll have it as 5. Then now, in order to solve for x, we should have to eliminate the square root. But how should we have to eliminate this square root? So we should have to understand that the carrier of the square root is given as 2. Therefore, we should have to introduce power 2 both sides. So in this case, we'll have power 2 and also have power 2 here. So we'll have x is equal to 25. So this is the solution. Because you have to understand that having this case, it is the same as having it as x to the power half and it times to the power half to the power 2. So in this case, you should have to understand that having x to the power m, times to the power n, this is the same as x to the power mn, where the powers has to multiply. So that's the principle that has been used there. That is, if you can recall on the laws of indices. So in this case, we have x to the power half times 2, which is given as the power 1, of which x to the power 1, it is the same as x, since the 1 becomes neutral right at that point. And how about, let's say, if we have this kind of a case, and we should have to see how we can make it up. Let's say we have the equation given as the square root of x plus 2, and let's say is equal to 4. Now, how should you have to solve for x if this is the case? So as you can see, the x we are looking for, it is under the square root. So we should have to eliminate the square root first in order to solve for x. So in this case, we'll have to introduce a power 2 both sides. So have x plus 2, which is equal to, we'll have 16. So have x is equal to 16 minus 2, which is x is equal, that should be 14. So that is the solution. And let's see how we can appreciate this one as well, like that. And let's say we have the square root of, and that should be x minus 3, and plus 3, and which is equal to 0. Now, how do you think we can have this? Feel free to pause the video and try to solve it on your own. Then later let's compare with what you can have to find it here. So now, first thing, we should have to make the expression with the radical as the subject formula. So have it as the square root of x minus 3, and which is equal to negative 3. Then we should have to introduce power 2 both sides, since this is the square root. So in this case, we have x minus 3, which is equal to 9. So have x is equal to 9 plus 3, which can be given as the 12. So this is the solution. That's how you should have to understand about solving the equations associated with radicals. And let's say we have a case. We have x plus, let's say, plus 2 square of x minus 1, and which is equal to, let's say, 4. Now how should you have the solution for this case? Principle remains the same. No matter what, express the expression with actually a radical as the subject formula. So in this case, we'll have to transfer x to the other side. So have it as 2 square of x minus 1, and which is equal to 4 minus x. So you should have to understand that the goal is to eliminate the root first, then solve for x. Then from there we should have to divide both sides by 2. So have that like that. So now we have the square of x minus 1, which is equal to 4 minus x, divided by 2. Then we are on the page where we can be able to eliminate the square root. So in this case, we have it as x minus 1, which is equal to, we'll have it as 4 minus x, to the power 2, and that divided by 2 to the power 2. And keep in mind that if we have m over n, then that to the power a, this is the same as having it as m to the power a divided by n to the power a. It is the same as that. So that's the principle that has been used there, as you can see. So in this case, we have it as x minus 1, and which is equal to, by the way, let me just have to eliminate c. Let me just have to eliminate this stuff c. So we have, x minus 1, which is equal to, now we have it as 4 minus x, times 4 minus x, break that, divide by, what is x to the, actually, what is 2 to the power 2? We have it as a 4. Then from there, we have to cross and multiply. And that will be actually given as, 1 times this, we'll have it as x, and that should be, we'll have it as 4 minus x, and 4 minus x, and which is equal to, and have 4 times x minus 1. So have to expand here, that will be given as 4 times 4, we have it as 16. And 4 times negative x, we have negative 4x, and also negative 4x here, and plus x squared, which is equal to 4x minus 4. So in this case, we should have to correct the like terms together, or have actually x squared, and minus 8x, and plus 16, which is equal to 4x minus 6, actually minus 4. So have it as x squared. Let me have it in this way, x squared minus 8x. Then we should have to bring this to the other side. We'll have it as negative 4x, since it's a positive, plus 16 plus 4, because this is a negative. Upon being transferred, we'll have it as a positive. So have x squared minus 12x, plus, that should be given as 20 is equal to 0. Now you can be able to solve this using the factor method of solving quadratic equations. So keep that in mind. And let's say, what if we have, let's say, this kind of a case, and they appreciate how we can solve it. Let's say we have a square of, should be x, and plus 5, and let's say plus x, which is equal to, by the way, we should have it as a negative here. Let's say we should have something like negative here, and is equal to 3. So how do you think we should have to handle this? Now, first thing, ensure that the expression with the radical is the subject formula. So which means we have the square of, that is x plus 5, which is equal to 3 plus x. Then we should have to eliminate the radical in that point. So have x plus 5, which is equal to, we'll have 3 plus x, times another 3 plus x, like that. So we have x plus 5, which is equal to, we'll have to expand there, we'll have 9, plus 3x plus 3x, and then plus x squared. So have x plus 5, which is equal to 9 plus 6x, and then plus x squared. We can have to transfer all these to this side. That will be given as 0 is equal to, we'll have x squared plus 6x minus x, plus 9 minus 5, like that. We'll have 0 is equal to x squared, plus 5x, that should be plus 4. So from this point, this is the same as x squared, plus 5x, plus 4 is equal to 0. Now you can be able to solve for x using the factor method. And if it happens that the factor method is not working, then you should have to go for, quadratic formula, or even that of the completing square method. So take note of that. Let's say if we have the square root of x and I divide by the square root of 2, and say we have is equal to 3 times the square root of 2. So now how do you think we can have to handle this? So no matter what, we should have to make the expression with a radical. Now in this case, you should have to understand that we happen to have, 3 radicals: a square root of x, a square root of 2, and the square root of 2 as well. But our goal it is to solve for x. So we should have to make the expression that has a radical that contains the variable as the subject formula. So we'll have to cross multiply. We'll have 1 times the square root of x, we have the square root of x, which is equal to 3 times the square root of 2 and square root of 2. So you should have to understand that square root of x, this is the same as having it as, 3 times. So what is the square root of x times the square root of x? You should have to understand that having square root of x is the same as 2 to the power half times 2 to the power half, of which, since the bases are the same, this is the same as having 3 times. Now since the bases are the same, we just have to add the powers. We'll have 2 to the power half plus half. What is half plus half is the same as 1. We have square root of x, which is equal to 3 times 2 to the power 1, which is the same as actually 6. So half the square root of x is equal to 6. Then from here we'll be able to solve for x by introducing square both sides. So half x is equal to 36. So that is the solution. And we can also have another alternative, how we can have that apart from considering it that way. We may think of, let's say, not actually multiplying this, but instead we can think of, let's introduce the power 2 both sides. So have power 2 both sides, like that. So in this case we have x is equal to, now we should have to understand that having mn to the power, let's say a, this is the same as having it as m to the power a times n to the power a. So if that is the case, then it means we'll have 3 to the power 2, like that, and the times square root of 2 to the power 2 times the square root of 2 to the power 2, like that. So in this case we have it as, and that should be 9 times, so this power 2 in the square will go, have it as 2 times, and also this one have it as 2, and that will be given as 36. So that is another way you can have it like that. And how about, let's say, if we can have this, and we should have to see how we can be able to handle that. Let's say we have the case that is, we have it as square root of x. Try to have this at your own time. Let's say square root of x minus 1, let's say plus 3. That should be equal to x. How can you have this? And also try to have it as 2 times the square root of. That should be x minus 4. Plus 3. Which is equal to x. How can you have that? And also try this. X plus 3. X plus 2. And is equal to. Now try to solve for those actually equations. So this is how you should have to understand about solving equations that contains radicals. Thank you.